April 19, 2021. A 4-pound helicopter lifted off the surface of Mars and flew for 39 seconds. It was supposed to fly 5 times, then die. NASA engineers gave it a 50-50 chance of even working, but that little helicopter kept going. 5 flights turned into 10. 10 turned into 50. And by the time it finally stopped, Ingenuity had completed 72 flights across 2 years. So how did a helicopter designed to fail after 2 weeks survive 33 times longer than planned on the most hostile planet in our solar system? NASA's Perseverance rover launched in July 2020 with a simple mission: search for signs of ancient life on Mars. But strapped to its belly was something that had nothing to do with that mission. A 1.8-kilogram helicopter that engineers had been fighting to include for years. The Mars helicopter project started as a wild idea in 2013. Flying on Mars seemed impossible. The atmosphere there is 99% thinner than Earth's. Imagine trying to fly a helicopter at 100,000 feet altitude. That's 3 times higher than any helicopter has ever flown on Earth. But Mimi Ang, the project lead at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, convinced NASA to take the gamble. Not because it would help find life on Mars, but because if it worked, it would change everything about how we explore other planets. The helicopter got a name: Ingenuity, and it got a budget of $80 million and a strict deadline. But building it meant solving problems no one had ever faced before. The rotor blades had to spin at 2,400 RPM, 5 times faster than a normal helicopter. Any faster, and the tips would go supersonic and tear themselves apart. The entire aircraft had to weigh less than 4 pounds, but survive temperatures that swing from 90 degrees during the day to minus 130 degrees at night. And it had to do all of this completely autonomously. Radio signals from Earth take 20 minutes to reach Mars. By the time NASA saw a problem, Ingenuity would already be crashed on the ground. So the team built something that could think for itself. Ingenuity used a downward-facing camera, an inertial measurement unit, and a tiny computer running custom flight software to navigate without any human input. Yeah, you read that right. The same processor that was in Android phones in 2014 was about to fly on Mars. But the biggest problem? Power. Mars gets about half the sunlight Earth does. Ingenuity's solar panel could only generate about 35 watts. That's barely enough to charge a laptop. And during those freezing Martian nights, the helicopter had to keep its electronics warm or the batteries would die permanently. The solution was brutal efficiency. Every single component was chosen to use the absolute minimum power. And every night, Ingenuity would use most of its battery just to survive until sunrise. On July 30th, 2020, Ingenuity launched from Earth inside Perseverance. 7 months later, it landed on Mars. Now came the scary part. Perseverance drove to a flat area NASA called Jezero Crater. On April 3, 2021, the rover dropped Ingenuity onto the Martian surface and drove away. Ingenuity was alone. For the first time, it had to survive a Martian night using only its own solar panel and battery. If it didn't wake up the next morning, the entire mission was over before it started. The next day, Ingenuity's solar panel caught the morning sun. The battery charged. The helicopter sent a signal back to Earth. It was alive. But flying was a different problem. NASA scheduled the first flight for April 11th. Then they delayed it. A software issue during a high-speed rotor test meant they had to upload a patch from 180 million miles away. 4 days later, they were ready. Ingenuity spun up its rotors, lifted 3 meters off the ground, hovered for 30 seconds, took a photo, and landed. 39.1 seconds of flight time. The first powered, controlled flight on another planet. NASA had attached a tiny piece of fabric from the Wright brothers' original 1903 aircraft to Ingenuity. The symbolism was intentional. This was humanity's Wright brothers moment on Mars. The plan was simple. 5 flights in 30 days to prove the technology worked. Then Ingenuity would be left behind while Perseverance continued its real mission. Flight 2 went higher. 5 meters up, 30 seconds in the air. Flight 3 went farther, 50 meters out and back. Flight 4 pushed even harder, 133 meters downrange at 2 meters per second. NASA engineers watched the data coming back from Mars and realized something. Ingenuity wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. The helicopter that was supposed to prove flying on Mars was possible had already done that. But what if it could do more? On April 30th, 2021, NASA made an announcement. Ingenuity's mission was being extended indefinitely. The helicopter would now scout ahead for Perseverance, finding safe routes and interesting targets. It would fly over terrain too dangerous for the rover to cross. It would take photos from angles no Mars mission had ever achieved. But this meant flying in conditions Ingenuity was never designed for. Flight 6 was supposed to be routine. Ingenuity would fly to a new location, take some photos, and land. But something went wrong. A navigation glitch mid-flight caused Ingenuity to wobble violently. The helicopter started tilting at angles it was never designed to handle. Power consumption spiked. The flight computer was seconds away from triggering an emergency shutdown. If Ingenuity crashed, that was it. No way to fix it. No way to recover it. Just another piece of human technology abandoned on Mars. But the flight software held on. It compensated for the bad data, stabilized the helicopter, and executed an emergency landing. Ingenuity touched down hard but intact. The engineers at JPL realized something that would define the next 2 years. Ingenuity could be damaged, knocked around, pushed beyond its limits, and it would still find a way to land safely. So they kept pushing. Flight 9 covered 625 meters in 166 seconds. Flight 25 lasted nearly 3 minutes and set a new altitude record at 14 meters. Flight 46 happened during a Martian dust storm with visibility so low that NASA debated calling it off. Ingenuity flew through summer and winter, through dust storms and communication blackouts, through software crashes and hardware failures. The helicopter's rotor blades started showing damage from repeated landings on rocks. Its navigation camera had dead pixels from radiation exposure. One of its landing legs had a crack in it. But it kept flying. By January 2024, Ingenuity had flown over 17 kilometers total across 128 minutes of flight time. It had scouted dozens of locations for Perseverance. It had captured thousands of photos. Flight 72 was scheduled as a simple vertical test. Go up 10 meters, take some photos, come back down. Ingenuity took off, reached altitude, and then contact was lost. For 2 days, NASA didn't know if Ingenuity had crashed or just lost communication. Perseverance wasn't in range to relay signals. The engineers could only wait. On January 20th, contact was reestablished. Ingenuity was on the ground, but the images it sent back told the story. One of its rotor blades had snapped off during landing. Without all 4 blades, Ingenuity would never fly again. After 1,000 Martian days, after surviving temperatures that should have killed it hundreds of times, after completing 67 more flights than it was designed for, Ingenuity's mission was over. But here's what Ingenuity proved. Flying on Mars isn't just possible, it's practical. NASA is already designing larger helicopters for future missions. One concept called Mars Science Helicopter could carry several kilograms of equipment. Another design could scout hundreds of kilometers ahead of rovers. Ingenuity's flight software has been updated and will be used on these next-generation aircraft. The lessons learned from 72 flights, from every failure and every success, are now part of NASA's playbook for Mars exploration. And Ingenuity itself? It's still sitting on Mars in Jezero crater. Its solar panel still generates power. Its computer still boots up every morning. It can't fly, but it can still take pictures and send data. NASA is using it as a stationary weather station, measuring wind speed and atmospheric conditions. Even broken, Ingenuity is still doing science. That 4-pound helicopter that was supposed to fail changed everything. It proved that the sky above Mars isn't a barrier. It's a highway. And somewhere in the next decade, when astronauts finally land on Mars, They might visit Jezero Crater and see Ingenuity sitting there, the little helicopter that refused to quit. NASA's next Mars mission, the Sample Return Campaign, is already planning to use helicopter technology. Subscribe for more stories like this.